Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Innovation Storytellers show. I'm your host, Susan Linder. And today we're going to take a little walk over to the Middle East. We're going to have a conversation with a guest of mine from Israel, but has certainly worked all over the planet, spending lots of time in Europe. And we're going to be talking today about the synergies between startups and grown-ups. We're going to be talking about the incredibly important mechanisms around cooperation and collaboration with vendors and partners, and why partnering in innovation is so critical to get us to the finish line faster and, frankly, more profitably. We're doing the innovation work that we do, not just to create new products and services, but really to generate value for everybody involved. And so when we start off with that ethos, everything changes. And so that's why I'm really excited to have my guest today on the call, Yaron Flint. So if you don't know Yaron, let me tell you a little bit about him. So Yaron is a fabulous business development expert. He is an accomplished innovation expert with nearly 2 decades of experience in global consulting firms, private equity, and leading operational roles in multinational corporations around the world. He specializes in implementing innovation strategies with large corporations across sectors like automotive, Industry 4.0, smart materials, environmental, and construction tech. With his unique cross-cultural and cross-sector experience, Yaron has gained valuable insights into the most effective means of incorporating innovation across organizations. In his new book, he shares his experience, expertise, and practical tools and strategies for successfully implementing innovation through business development. So welcome to the show, Yaron. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the name of that book, if you're looking for it, folks, is Innovative Business Development, Implementing Transformation from Within. So maybe just start us off, Yaron, by telling us why you decided to write this book.
So the reason is quite simple. When I started working in Continental as a German company, I came on board and asked them.
And Continental's a tire company, is that right?
Yes, tire is one division out of the five that they used to have. So it's one of the biggest, largest tier one companies in the world for automotive, and tier ones are the one doing the integration process within large OEMs and the car makers. So I asked my team, what guidebook are you working according to? When you look for interesting technologies on the outside and looking how to implement them, what is the guidebook that you're following? And they said, we don't have any guidebook. It's like trial and error. And when I started circling around and asking many other companies, I found that this is kind of the case in most of the companies I found. And I said, this is very odd. There's no practical guidebook on how to do it in a structured and proper way. So I should write it. And this is what I did. And like you said, the cross-culture, cross-vertical experience gave me a very, very good overview on what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you get into the innovation space to begin with?
So back in 2010, which is almost 15 years ago, that's a long time, right? I started working for one of the automotive corporations, biggest ones here. And what I found out, and that was in the very early stages of the auto tech, the automotive makers looking for new and exciting technologies, basically going through the digital transformation, transforming the vehicles into software driven, Google X, all these kind of things that they started really surfacing within this world. And I saw that there's a huge gap between all the startups and very, very interesting technologies that they are trying to address and show this automotive world, and the willingness from large corporations to adopt them, but really no one to integrate it and no one to work this gap and be in the in-between and take these interesting technologies and ideas and really implement it as part of the product roadmap. So what I figured out very early in my career is that it's all about the execution eventually. Because if you can have the best idea out there, if you don't know how to integrate it and turn it into part of your product roadmap, it just remains as a good idea, right? So innovation is all about implementation eventually. And how do you execute it? And that kind of brought me to this world of really executing and onboarding these technologies into large corporations.
And it's funny, right? Then you come into this world of innovation and you go, okay, I'm doing my job, I'm doing it right. There's still no guidebook, right? There's no manual to help me how to do it. So
Exactly,
I might as
exactly.
well go ahead and write. So tell us a little bit about some of the innovation projects that you've worked on.
Definitely. So, well, unfortunately, many of them are still under NDA, so I can share things that are already
Sure.
published, right?
All of my listeners
Um,
are familiar with that life for sure.
what can we do? So, I'd like to share it to start from one that I really hold dear to my heart, because this is a project that I kind of envisioned and worked from A to Z. So, it's kind of like leading it, pushing it, fighting against everyone in order to make it follow through, and eventually it won the environmental achievement of the year in manufacturing. So
Mm.
it's like a baby all the way through, and really really being successful in some way. And what I love or believe in is that innovation is all about connections between two relevant technologies that never coexisted before. This is the best way to innovate, as I see it. Why? Because it's not really, you don't need to invent the wheel. You just need to find a way to reutilize it in some way. So combining two elements or two technologies that never coexisted before is the best way to find new and exciting ideas and technologies. And the best example for that is bring a mature technology from one sector to the other. And that's doing it cross sectors. It enabled me to do so. So this is a perfect example for that. And this is an invisible marker for the tire world. Not a lot of people know about the tire world. They think when you talk about tires that this is a very, I don't know, boring kind of product with not a lot of innovation going into that. And I have to say, I was extremely surprised. This is one of the most innovative solutions out there. It has everything from material science to electronics to safety issues. This is like really, really interesting, and working with these guys in Continental was the highlight of my career there in some way. So one of the projects that we worked on is the recycling or ESG environmental, using an invisible marker in order to trace the tire for circular economy. So you want to understand that the tires, and this is an interesting part because rubber has a problem on both ends. So you have the extraction from the tree, wanting to make sure that you're not abusing the work power and you're not creating deforestation. And on the other hand, you have the recycling element that wants to go back into the tires that you produce. So finding an invisible marker that can trace it from the tree extraction to the new tire is something that the tire industry has been struggling for many, many years. And the problem is that a lot of these invisible markers do not survive the curing process of a tire. So when I was faced with this problem, I said, hey guys, have you ever tried to look at an invisible marker in another industry, like the
Hmm.
metal industry or plastics, which is all working with higher temperatures? And they said, no, we never tried that. That's an interesting idea. Who do you know from that space? So I said, guys, BASF is like across the street. Why don't you talk to them? And
Huge chemical company, sure.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
called a friend of mine there and I asked him, what are they doing around that? And he said, by chance, we started implementing a really cool technology that came from a metal industry to our plastics division. They can do rubber. Just talk to them. So I picked up the phone and called the CEO and asked him, are you able to use your technology in rubber? And he said, yes, we can, but why should we do that? And now you find yourself in a spot which is very, very difficult because you find the right technology. Now you need to convince the startup to work with a large conglomerate in a field they never worked on. And startups like to be focused, right? And the tire guys to work with a startup who has never been or acquainted or has the experience in working in the tire industry. Now, good luck in that, but that was really, really difficult.
Yeah. So this is one part of it, right? Is a lot of people might refer to this as open innovation, as looking outside the four walls of your own organization to figure out new methods of solving problems, right? But then we want to take those ideas, bring them back in, and figure out how to make them even better for us, right?
Yeah.
So adding extra layers like this, like sustainability on top of the work that we're already doing, has far reaching implications, right? And then you start bumping into other people's agendas around things like sustainability or labor practices or whatever else. So How do you find that you tell the story around something like that when it's going kind of outside of the comfort zone of the people who originally started it? Is it easier or harder to tell that story?
So it's funny that you're saying storytelling, because when people ask me what was the key definement points of my career and how was I able to push for these kind of innovation, I say, guys, I'm a great storyteller. I know how to tell a story right. And it's just not just speaking to someone. It's really tapping into, like a storyteller, to what this guy would like to hear. What are his interests and what would make him move forward or be motivated, and then telling the story in a way that he would align with it and correspond and become from a passive supporter maybe to an active one.
Mm.
So being the storyteller is the most important thing in a business development manager and an innovation manager. For me, this is the first thing I would look for when I had a team. How are you able to present a story, the same topic, in 5 or 6 different approaches altogether? And that's the point. So some of the people were all about the interesting story around it. This is an interesting story, implementing something new into a tire. The other ones were the first to market. So the sales guy, right? I want to be the first to market. I want to do it before my competition. You can use a very great PR on this. You can win prizes, things like that.
Mhm.
The R&D guys were all about the technology. How does this work? How did we not find something like this that solved the same solution when we looked for so many years? And the environmental guys is all about ESG and being able to comply to regulations. So the same topic you presented from various aspects and various phases in order to really apply it to the right manner of the other side and what he wants to hear.
Yeah. And so what was that story that you told?
So
How did
this is exactly it. The story was depending on the person that was sitting in front of me.
Yes.
I would have tell the same topic in a different way altogether. So it's all about trying to tap into what are the challenges or what are this guy is seeing as problematic in this solution and working your way around that. Okay. Some people really had the problem with NIH. So you highlight the fact that this is a mature technology for another sector that we could never develop by ourselves. So he said, oh, okay, if we cannot do it by ourselves and this is mature, let's talk to them. Another one, you're addressing really the pain point that he is having. And man, you've been struggling with this for so many years. This is a way to solve it. I know this takes a lot of time and effort on your end, but let's do it together. Let's present it together to the board. Let's present it together to the managers. Let's build the story right. You really need to tap into what are the things that stopping him for wanting to take this forward and working your way towards from that end.
Yeah. I often start these kinds of engagements when thinking about writing a multifaceted story, right? Because it's not never one story that's going to wind up working, as if we
Yeah,
heard just one advertisement in our life and we were suddenly compelled to buy something, right?
exactly.
And so I always use with my clients an empathy map. And an empathy map is derived from design thinking that helps people really step into the shoes of the listener and doesn't just say, okay, I get this cool innovation, I get why it works and how it works, but my storyteller also needs to be responsible for the pain that I'm currently incurring, and not just the pain of like what's going to be alleviated as a result of your cool innovation, but what's the pain of having to implement your very annoying, very time consuming, very expensive potentially solution. So I have to come with a lot of empathy to say, I know we're going to make a change here. I think it's going to be for the best, but there's going to be some bumps along the way. There's going to be challenges along the way. And by the way, I'm going to be here for you through them. And I think a lot of innovation leaders leave out that recognition of making any kind of change is painful for the
Yeah.
person who has to adopt it.
I think this is a perfect way to present it to people who have or fear of change and are risk averse, because they're
Mm.
saying, I'm afraid of this. I don't know. So you're saying, hey, man, I'm here all the way. I'm going to support you. We're going to do it. Take it baby steps, and I make sure you don't fail. So this is very, very important. And again, it's like the biggest mistakes that I've seen startups do is present the same way to everyone they meet. You have to create different stories of your product
Amen.
and different angles to the other side. Know your customer, know who you're addressing, and tailor the story to the way that he would align with it.
100%. 100%. No one story is a one size fits all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. So that's a really cool innovation, and you wind up winning these sustainability awards as a result of it. What else do you think is fascinating for my audience? Like, what else can we learn from the other kinds of storytelling you've done around the innovations that you've worked on?
Yeah, I think that one of the interesting part is finding a win-win situation, which means before
Mm,
you even go into a story, make sure that the collaboration that you're creating creates a win-win all around, because that's going to be an easier sell to everyone involved. So I was always looking not only to bring new technologies from other verticals, but to create such a story that no one would say, hey, what's their angle? What's our angle? Everyone understands what the win-in is for everyone. And one of the cool stories is a company in what I did in Stanley Black & Decker that came from concrete, and they basically redefined the way that you examine concrete. Now, I don't want to take you too deep into the technology, but the way you basically monitor concrete these days, you send samples after you pour it to the lab, and
mm,
they return after 28 days. And now you have to understand, once it comes back to the site, it has nothing to do with the real world, right? Because the real world changed. It was rain, humid, I don't know, whatever conditions change, and the concrete is totally different than the one in the lab. So they came with a solution to develop a sensor that is able to monitor things on site in real time and give you the maturity level of the concrete. Now, this is very, very interesting because it also taps into environmental solution, because it enables you to save money and save pouring more concrete, which is very, very detrimental to the environment in some way. Now, the win-win situation here was very, very simple. This is a company that has a technology that's already working in the UK market. We in Stanley Black & Decker don't have this technology, but we have the reach in the US. Let's use our network in order to push their technology. They will get a partner that pushes this in the US, and we will get a new cool technology that we can showcase and sell side by side to our products. This is a definitive win-win situation all around, right? And that's the way to work around it. Build it in the right way, in the right format, that everyone comes on board. Because some people might say, why do I need this? I can develop it better by myself. I don't trust these people. I need to train all the salespeople now. Why should I get into this even? So you need to find exactly like I said before, the right way to address them and kind of calm their anxiety in so many ways.
Yep. And win-win is step number 7 of the innovation storytelling process. You have to have this mindset. And frankly, not only in the beginning of how we both win, but over the long term. So even if you wind up collecting and deriving data from the results of your work together, how will we continue to share data over time? If it's a technology product and a software product that we're putting into place with one another, then how am I going to make sure that upgrades and updates are actually benefiting you as the partner, not just following some random product roadmap that we have these milestones along the way? Or maybe there is a customer advisory board or a partner advisory board where people can continue to share inputs and insights. And those become really amazing stories because they're not one and done. They're ongoing for the long-term win. I think if the SaaS model of software has taught us nothing else, it's that we are in for the long term when we are in relationship with other people. And if you plan on it being short term in any way, the initiative doesn't have a great shot of surviving.
100%. And this is I think, the first thing that you learn when you create partnerships beyond the win-win situation, that if you don't treat this as a real partnerships, and partnerships means that you can learn as much as you can educate the other side, and you can benefit as much as the other side benefits from this. And this will be an ever evolving story, that this is not a real partnership. Someone is taking advantage of the other side in some way, and this will eventually go nowhere. So you
That's
need
right.
to have all these together in insight and to see how this partnership becomes better and better. The trust, of course, something that you need to work on, but you increase the relationship. You do things together, you evolve. And this is very, very important.
So let's shift the conversation now to the so exciting, so perilous relationship between startups and large corporates, or I like to call them startups and grown-ups.
Mhm.
So thinking about that relationship, I've heard from so many people on this show, love startups. I love what they do. Doesn't work for my business because dot, 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 because we're so huge and these guys are so small. Just to pass security regulations is a year. We acquire these companies, they don't fit in with our culture. We just take their technology and their customers leave. We are a small company, and frankly, our technology is so superior to the granddads that we wound up working with that we spent half of our time just trying to teach these old farts how to step into the 21st century with our really cool new thing. So, what's been your experience, Yaron, on how large corporates can make it work when working with startups?
So everything you describe basically is an example of companies who don't know how to work with startups. And they can say they love them, but they don't because they don't know what they can do with them. So
Mm-hmm.
loving them, when they say, I love this startup, it means I like the technology. It
Mm.
doesn't mean necessarily I like to work with startup, which is a totally different story altogether. So that's a huge thing to remember. And eventually, I kind of disagree that the large corporations are grown-ups. In many cases, they could be the child in this relationship because they lack the maturity level. And if you think about it, the way that startups and corporations look at the world are totally different. 180 degrees. Usually corporations, when they let's start from the basics, right? Corporations are not tuned to work with startups. They have two states of world. Either you're a customer or you're a supplier. They don't know how to work in anyone in between. And what you said as an example, and I'm talking about early beginning before they figured out how to do that, right? Once they figured out, it's totally different. But most of them don't have an onboarding process to evaluate startups. And this is exactly what you said as an example when they say
Mm-hmm.
they don't comply with our regulation. What do you mean? They don't need to comply with your regulation. You're just evaluating the technology at this point. Once you've done evaluating the technology, this starts a phase of working together with them in order to create a product that is new. If you already want them to comply with your regulation, you are looking at them as a vendor, not as a startup you want to work with. That's the whole difference. So you need to look at the startup in a pre-vendor situation of evaluating the technology, seeing that it makes sense and working together in some way or fashion to create this a perfect fit to your product roadmap. And rarely I found the case that it fits from day one. You need to have these kind of working relationships together. Now, like I said, if you look at the maturity level of this, usually corporations kind of morph or mature into working with startups. They start from an M&A process saying, I still want to own the technology. And even if I understand that I want to work with the outside world, I still want to control the technology, which means I want to buy the company. Then they move and say, okay, I can't buy everything. Maybe I'll start investing. And they start investing in everything they see in an interesting way. And again, this is not the majority of all the corporations, but usually this is the transition that happens. You can skip ways, but a lot of corporations do follow this trajectory. And when they start investing into the company, they find themselves now with a portfolio of many companies they don't know what to do with. And then they start the evaluation and strategy figuration of what do I do with them? How do I push them inside our company? What do I do with the things that don't suit? They start kind of working around with company and eventually they mature into a position of, okay, now we understand we can do a win-win situation and work with a partnership with a company. Some executive asked me when we did this deal with Converge with the company, asked me, how much did it cost us? And I said, it didn't cost us anything. Everything was a win-win situation. He said, what do you mean? We didn't invest into them? And that's kind of the idea. A lot of these executives think, if I want to work with a startup, I need to buy it, I need to invest in it. They need to progress to the partnership kind of level. And when you look at this from the startup world, They start from a point of, I want to start working with you. Eventually, I will lead to an M&A process where you buy me out. So it's kind of a different perspective of how they see the world, and you need to gap that. That's the biggest kind of a way. And a lot of this is education. So, and I'll give you an example just on that. When I started working with the tire division in Continental, the first meeting I had was with the guy who was responsible for the tire manufacturing across whole of Continental. And he told me, look, what you're doing is amazing, but I'm never going to work with a startup. What can a startup educate me or teach me that I haven't been doing? And I've been doing that already for 150 years. Now, once you hear that, and this is exactly the example you said, you understand that the basically his statement comes from ignorance, not ignorance of not knowing what's happening in the world, but ignorance of not working with startups. And what you need to understand in that phase is how to build it and break it down. And what I came to this guy and said, look, if you're looking at the entire process from A to Z, you're totally right, because that means this startup needs to be a tire manufacturing company. But if you break it down to specific process elements, and every company has that, the logistics, the extraction, the moving into the facility or the manufacturing plant, the manufacturing, molding, extraction, all these kind of things, eventually in every process, you'll figure out the challenges and pain points you're struggling with, and startups address that. And that's where you need to start playing. You need to start playing on the pain points and where external technologies, not only startups, by the way, it could be mature companies, are addressing this pain point and might do it in a different and better way than you are.
Yeah. And I think there's so many lessons to be learned on both sides of the equation, right? Mm-hmm. The startups need just as much guidance as the grown-ups do. But I think there's also one other piece, is that there has to be someone who is an advocate, like a diehard advocate for both the startup, but even more importantly, the problem that needs to be solved. And it needs to be urgent and important and unsolvable by the current means within the organization. Because if someone is not constantly saying, guys, we need to fix this, guys, we need to fix this, then the startups become like a nice to have as opposed to a must have. Yeah. And creating that story of advocacy and urgency is so critical to getting past all the annoyances, getting past all the stage gates and the security controls and the localization across 16 languages and whatever else that needs to happen to make it work. But I think there's got to be like the cheerleader at the helm too.
Yeah, it's basically what you would call a champion. And that's, sure, you have to have that. That's number one. If you don't have a champion within the organization or the business unit that we're working with, nothing will move.
Right. Someone who's willing to put their reputation on the line for it too, right? Which is sometimes the hardest part. Like, wow, if this whole thing goes up in smoke, like I can lose my raise, my promotion, my professional reputation. There's got to be that change maker who's willing to put themselves on the line.
But I have to say, this is very, very important, but you can't neglect the other things. And it's basically a combination of a lot of, I would say, positive forces that are working towards the same goal. A champion is a must. Nothing can move without it. But if you don't get the buying of the other people as well, and turn what I would like to call passive supporters into active ones, nothing will get through as well. So you need to have this guy work your way from that, but also from the upper way and also from the down.
Yes, downside. You need the prophet and you need the apostles. You need a team of 6 to 12 people who are going to take up the cause as well. And even if they get fed to the lions, it's still going to be worthwhile.
Exactly. When you think of companies, and I think this is the biggest misconception, you always think of companies as something very higher, right? And this could not be more further than the truth. There is a hierarchy and a different hierarchy, but it's also a multi-matrix way of working together, where the executives have the number twos and number three, and they would never go against them because these are the guys who are like pushing everything and making things happen. So he would try to find the best way to work together with them. And this kind of multi-layered matrix is something that you need to understand, because you need to get a lot of supporters as much as possible, and not only the buying of one.
Yeah. So, given the little time we have left, I want to talk briefly about your book and some of the examples that you've shared in it. So, I think the steps that you've lined out are okay, let's talk about technology, let's talk about partnership development, and let's talk about creating real value. What are some of the structures you can give advice to my audience about how they can really begin to evaluate these things and put them into practice?
This is a great question. And one of the processes that I show is when you understand as a company that you need to onboard external technologies and really start this kind of experimentation and seeking out these technologies. And I think the misconception here, because a lot of these fail, is that you did something wrong on the onboarding process. And here is where I come with a new kind of statement where you did a lot of things wrong on the evaluation side in the beginning, which means the first step is understanding the challenges and which problems are you addressing. If you are mapping the wrong ones, you will get the wrong technologies, and eventually this will lead nowhere. And it's like Henry Ford said it. If I would ask my customers what did they want, they would say faster horses. So when you're working with the business units, you always need to figure out not what they're asking you, but what they really need. And that's a huge difference, because, and I'll give you a great example from when I started working with Stanley Black & Decker. So one of the teams that I worked with was a team that developed a table saw, right? And when you ask them, guys, what do you need? They said, better material, better blades, better battery. And when you start really to talk to them, you understand that what they're trying to solve is saving the end worker, or the guy who's working in the construction site, time. And then when you check that, you find out that 95% of this time, the guy is doing measurements and not cutting. So you basically kind of redefine and say, guys, you're not looking to solve a cutting solution, you're looking to solve a measurement solution. So what you need to find now is something, an add-on that comes on top the table saw and enables you to do automated measurements and things like that. So once you really understand what you're looking for, you can find the right solutions. Because if I would continue looking for this better blades, better material, I would look for the wrong things and it would lead nowhere. So defining what you're looking for in the problem is the key element where you start from. The second phase is the scouting. And when I say scouting, is how do you look for these technologies? Most companies, they do what I would like to refer to as looking for the coin under the lantern, which means if I'm looking for an AI solution in construction, I would go to the construction landscape and look for the best AI companies out there. But if you did your first process right and defining the problem, you can now go and find a technology in Homeland Security, Industry 4.0, smart materials, because you're focusing on the technology. So it's not a startup scouting, it's a technology scouting. What would be the best technology that will help me solve it? And then the onboarding process looks much easier. And that's a different story. That's the third phase. And here I come in the book with a lot of insights and what to do and what not to do in order to make this onboarding process more smooth or smoother.
I think that's super helpful. And I really hope my listeners will take a look at your book too, and we'll include that link in the show notes. So I want to take us to the hot seat questions now, Yaron, if you're up for it. Tell us, what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
Yeah, and this might surprise you, because a lot of people would say, you would most likely say Google X, because you came from automotive, right? And these guys have defined the autonomous vehicle.
I have never had anyone say Google X as the greatest
Really?
innovation of all time. I have not.
Well,
This is new.
innovation team of all time, right?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about the team. I'm asking you about
The
technology.
best innovation in
Greatest
technology.
innovation of all time. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to come and say things like the wheel, right? And things like that, because everyone
All
would
good
say that.
answers.
Everyone will say that. But I think the best innovation of all time was the community in some cases, where people started really collaborating as a community and finding a way to work together. That created everything that we can see today. And basically every technology that we have is kind of built upon the people who came before us. And in order to do that, you have to have this community sense. You have to understand that a lot of the things that you will develop, you will not see the fruit of your labor in your lifetime, but you're leaving something for the people that come after you. And that can only be achieved by a sense of community.
Yeah, interesting. So is that organized society?
In so many ways, right? You
Yeah.
need to have an organized society to create a community, but it's more about the mindset, right? And
Well,
I
I mean,
think
you could have a group of hunter-gatherers, right? Who could
exactly.
be a community that could be 10
And
people.
and you can say that Israelis, for example, and this is a great example, they are the least organized people in the world, and they have the strongest sense of community. So it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. I think a
Interesting.
community is something that is very important, specifically when talking about startups, because if you really think about it from a sociological point of view, why are you able to make choices and fail? Because the society supports you and say this is okay. If you feel comfortable in trying to fail, then you will fail and achieve great things.
Yeah. So now we'll go to the team question. What is the innovation team that you would have loved to have joined if you could?
Okay, so that's kind of like I said, people might think that I would say Google X because I came from the automotive. I think, and I'm not going to talk about the Manhattan Project and all these kind of things because I'm not a physicist, but I see what Disney Studio Labs are doing as the most innovative thing out there. They're basically redefining the entertainment environment by leveraging technologies from the outside. So they're finding new and cool features and ways to integrate them from other verticals in order to increase our, I would say, entertainment. And people who've been in, of course, Disney and see the Millennium Falcon and the Smuggler's Run really understand how you can create a great experience by combining technologies from various sectors. So if you look at what I described before of combining various sectors to create new and innovative things, I think these guys are spot on in the spearhead of innovation integration.
And my last question is, if you could, like, what's something that really pisses you off or something that you wish existed that you hope some innovator would make or create?
Teleportation.
Teleportation.
I hate traffic. I really hate traffic. Someone needs to invent that. That will save so much time and effort here.
So you're saying you just want to get over traffic. You don't even want to go back to, I don't know, the 1840s or go forward into the year 2200.
Exactly. This is such a waste of time. I want to get wherever I need to get to without going through security checks and airports and things like that. That's such a waste of time.
Got it. Okay. Well, Yaron Flint, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn. Just
LinkedIn.
ping me on LinkedIn and we can take it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.